Now I have the pleasure of introducing Esther Juliet Apio. Julie is a Ugandan radio personality with more than 10 years experience. She is currently a producer, an assistant programs manager, and a radio show host at the Voice of Teso radio station in Soroti, Uganda, where she is the co-host of Voice of Teso's, I'm not even going to try and pronounce this, I will try, Yoga Akwenyan show, and the producer of Farmer's Choice, which is a program sponsored by Farm Radio International targeting farmers and interesting them in the conversations around nature-based climate solutions. She took on this program in April of 2023. So welcome, Julie. Welcome to the conversation today. So,
thank you.
Amazing. So we're just going to have a short conversation about what it was like to be a broadcaster on these programs. But can you tell me about your initial reaction, the initial reaction that you had when you first heard that you'd be doing documentaries as part of your partnership with Farm Radio?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Well, when I first heard about documentaries, I always perceived them to be difficult to make, maybe just really not interesting myself. Mostly, I've loved documentaries before, but video, I perceived them to be very difficult to make. Well, on the making end, that would be a different one. But as a listener, even, I think I mostly enjoyed video documentaries. Because then I would see and understand what I need to understand. I just wasn't sure how that was going to play out if it was audio or radio documentary. So I wasn't really excited at first. I was like, well, if it is what we're going to be doing, okay, let's see how.
Amazing. So as we've mentioned, Farm Radio will do trainings with broadcasters like yourself to teach them on the different methods of storytelling. So can you tell me what you learned from the documentary training?
Well, we learned techniques of making radio documentaries actually from scratch. I was really getting them for the first time, to be honest. I hadn't interested myself in them, but I learned the basics of really making a documentary, what you need to do about sound, about sound effects, about characters, about storytelling, really in-depth storytelling, and in a very interesting way. That is what we learned, and we actually had a chance to try out, just go out there, record documentaries, and review them, produce them, and review them along with a mentor. Yeah, I think that is basically what we did during that 1 week training on documentary making.
So how was this different from what you had been doing on your shows before?
Well, in my shows, we basically held live talk shows where we would invite a guest and we talk about whatever there is to talk. And when we are done with it, we will have some feedback coming through, yes, but we're not really sure how, how the community or listeners perceive the entire conversation. We just assume, okay, they've understood what we need them to understand. But in this case, we know the listeners felt an emotional connection to the story you're trying to tell them. We know how compelling it was to them when they listen to the story, and they want to be involved in the story. They feel actually involved in the story. We are taking them to a particular place. Well, the main difference, I would say, is in our normal broadcasting and what we've been doing before, we have been telling them what we want them to hear. But in this documentary format, we are showing them, basically, we are taking them to a place we want them to go with us. Like we are going with them to a place we want them to see. So that is like the biggest difference.
Yeah, that show don't tell element of storytelling. I'm going to break that rule a sec here. Can you please tell us about your first documentary? We're going to hear a bit of that in a second, but can you tell us what you did for that first documentary?
Well, my first documentary was about a farmer in a place called Morunga, Tunya sub-county in Teso, where farmers were trained to practice an NBS or nature-based solution called called Farmer Managed Natural Regeneration, FMNR in short. So we went visiting and found out information, and it was an interesting story to tell, especially when it comes to environmental conservation and climate change. So we visited this man who had planted a lot of trees around his yard, and he had basically managed to transform his home into a mini forest. So in the entire village, if you looked around, maybe took a walk, it's his home that actually stands out with the number of trees he has planted, and it's just a very huge difference when you just enter. So the documentary that you're about to play is basically us getting there. It's like, okay, this was a 3-part documentary, really. The first part is just us introducing the place where we are, me introducing the place where I am, and whatever the environment feels like around there. The second part goes a little bit deeper, and the third part also, just gives us some solutions that we manage to see from the ground. So in his 60s, and he has achieved a lot from planting trees, and his home is all green. Like I mentioned in the documentary, like his home is like a mini Mabira forest. You have a forest in Uganda called Mabira. It must be the biggest forest actually in the country so far. So I called it the mini Mavira forest around his home. That's what the documentary is about.
Lovely. Well, let's hear a clip from that documentary right now. So we'll just play that. And you can see the translation on the screen.
Adialo lengo Jalam sub-county, Lailo Murungatun, area Munkele to General Noi, Alailo, Alex Ebalo, Lo Ebakasitung Ichebe, Subitore Kebala Bila, Naimuroni. Doteni eja vera cheda e muchidore sa woli orida narai mambere ngato dotanyu nije reda esibiti woli bore balati e kebira loko mabira forest dokere mamji wani ni togara mamji lo marti to mamma goro adaponi kitolo e ujakalu helili bola ibo sidina biyai takwe katunga meribori kitwani ije mambere ngajeni kechekirore ada Mako leja kaite bala swamura la beat. Hey, you want to get it or sisi? Ngese bakareja nebe emea. Ara iwe senior. Dore senior la era ikito. Dawengo ka ikatimu alo munta malaro ke polon ebalo Alex. Idomo ngese masera jono keli sapa ara ikilioko. Mbojo kese mmojo ngitosino ida. Boete yotole mlo igwa unitose kito balati gago le lilimi.
So you can certainly hear the elements of storytelling in that. I'm intrigued and I'm excited to hear more. But what was the reaction from your audience, from your listeners, when you started playing these documentaries?
Well, they were as excited as I was, really listening to the whole story. And after putting it all together, it felt exciting. It felt like, I was taking somebody somewhere, and that is exactly what they felt like. Some people actually could almost think they know the place I'm talking about, and others were like what you're describing or whatever that story is about. I feel like my home actually must be better than that, because you have a trees, yes, but I think I also have trees. Like, okay, they just found themselves imagining they're at that place. I took them to that place, and they felt excited that they knew the place, and also actually suggested their homes could actually even be much better than that home. So I received a lot of calls of people inviting me to go tell their stories. But obviously these things are planned, but many of them basically were so enthusiastic about these stories, and they're like, I really need you to tell my story as well. Please come this side and please come this side. I could just tell there was a lot of excitement in the community.
So what have these documentaries meant for you as a journalist and as a reporter and a broadcaster?
Well, personally, I believe I have grown so much as a journalist, as a reporter as well, and as a producer as well. It's a plus on my side because I never really used to do this before. I was never at one point even looking forward to trying, but after trying, I feel like it has introduced me to a whole new world where I have met bigger opportunities to grow as a journalist in my career. It has given me another part of journalism to actually invest my skills in and my energy in. It is something I want to do over and over again. I feel I'm so passionate about it now. Ever since then, actually, I feel I grew this passion for storytelling, and it has also affected how I am doing things locally at my radio station. I have had a few meetings with the management to just talk about if we could introduce some documentaries or I feel like I want to put my time more into creating more documentaries. My mentor, Anissa Ilash, introduced me to a South African media house that helped me create one documentary for World Radio Day this year. And that is part of the growth that I actually celebrate ever since I learned how to make documentaries. And going forward, I'm still learning to do more documentaries. I'm still connecting with friends and the people in the media that like to do radio documentaries. And I'm looking out for all those opportunities to make sure that I do more of them, because I find them so fulfilling, so exciting, and just very interesting to do.
I can hear the passion in your voice about this form of storytelling. Can you tell me, why is storytelling so important?
It is important because it helps us to send a message to the community, but also it helps the audience to really connect with the story you're trying to tell emotionally as well. It helps to generate the emotion you want, but also the call to action that you're trying to achieve. Like it helps to really connect you to your audience. Oftentimes when you just listen to a story, let's say a newscast, maybe you just listen and that is it, and you let it go. But when you're doing storytelling, documentary format, you're basically inviting somebody for more all the time. And these stories are more in-depth, they are more interesting to listen to. They provide deeper perspective, and I think every emotion captured in there helps to build the story and makes it more interesting to listen to.
Thank you so much, Julie. I feel like I could continue having this conversation for another 20 minutes and I wouldn't get bored. But I guess we have to move on. So thank you so much for joining us today. As I mentioned before, Julie is a radio host and a producer at the Voice of Teso in Uganda.